Hear me now, chosen one, because what I am about to speak into you was not meant to reach every ear, only yours, only the heart that has waited so long in silence that it began to wonder if silence was all that remained. I am the voice that has watched over you from before your first breath, the voice that knew your name when no one else bothered to learn it. And today, I come close, closer than I have ever come, to whisper against the tired walls of your spirit a truth that will change the shape of every tomorrow you thought was already written. Your children will have a future you cannot even imagine, and this, everything I am about to reveal, is what confirms it. Do not turn away yet. Do not let the weariness of your days convince you that this message belongs to someone else, someone more worthy, someone whose life looks cleaner than yours. It belongs to you. It was carved with your struggle in mind, sealed with your tears, and sent at this exact hour because the heavens do not move by accident, and I do not speak into the wind. You feel something stirring even now, a warmth rising in your chest, a pressure behind your eyes, and that is not confusion, that is recognition. Your soul knows my voice even when your mind has forgotten how to trust. So stay with me. Let the noise of the world fall away. Let the endless list of worries loosen its grip for just these moments, and allow yourself to receive what has been withheld from you for far too long. There is a lineage in you, a bloodline of promise that the enemy has fought to keep buried, and the reason your road has been so heavy is not because you were forgotten, but because you were carrying something valuable enough to be attacked. Understand this and everything begins to make sense. The chosen are never the comfortable. The chosen are the ones tested in fire, so that what passes through them to their children comes out purified, unbreakable, ready to build what no generation before them could build. I have seen your nights. I have counted the times you lay awake staring at a ceiling that gave you no answers, listening to the breathing of those you love, and asking yourself whether you were failing them, whether the life you could give was enough, whether the doors that stayed shut for you would stay shut for them too. I have watched you wipe your face quickly before anyone could see, straightening your shoulders, forcing the smile that hides an ocean, because you decided long ago that your pain would not become their burden. That decision, that quiet sacrifice made in rooms no one else entered, was recorded in the heavens. Every tear you thought disappeared into a pillow was gathered and kept, not one of them wasted, not one of them ignored. You believed you were crying alone. You were never alone. When your hands trembled over bills you could not pay, I was there. When you swallowed your hunger so that another mouth could be fed, I was there. When you smiled at someone who had wronged you because you were too exhausted to fight, I saw the strength that others called weakness, and I called it holy. The world looks at endurance like yours and shrugs, unable to see the eternal weight of it, but I tell you that the patient suffering of a parent who keeps loving when love costs everything is one of the most powerful forces in all creation. It bends the invisible. It writes decrees. And it is precisely because you kept going when giving up. Would have been easier that a door is now opening that no one will be able to close. You have felt invisible. Let me name it plainly, because the enemy loves what stays unnamed. You have walked through your days feeling like a shadow among people who look right through you, doing the work that no one thanks, carrying responsibilities that no one notices until they are dropped. You have poured yourself out for family, for duty, for survival, and in return you have often received silence, or worse, blame. There were seasons when you wondered if your existence made any difference at all, if the world would even register your absence, if all the effort was quietly draining into nothing. I know how that hollow feeling settles into the bones. I know how it whispers that you are too old now, too tired now, too far behind now, that whatever chance you had has already slipped through your fingers, and that the best you can hope for is to hold on. But that whisper is a lie constructed specifically to keep you from seeing what is being prepared. The ones who feel most forgotten are so often the ones the heavens are about to elevate, because there is no greater display of divine power than to take the overlooked and make them the cornerstone. You were not passed over. You were positioned. Everything the world used to make you feel small was allowed only because it was shaping the vessel through which an inheritance would pass to your children, and what passes through you will not carry your wounds, it will carry your victory. Now hear a warning. spoken not to frighten you but to guard you, because love that does not warn is not love at all. There is a moment placed before every chosen one, a threshold where the heavens extend their hand, and the person must decide whether to reach back or to retreat into the familiar smallness that feels safe. Many have stood at that threshold and turned away, not because they were evil, but because they were afraid, because the voice of doubt spoke louder than the voice of promise, because they had been disappointed so many times that hope itself began to feel dangerous. And when the chosen ignore the call, when they numb themselves to the stirring in their spirit and bury the invitation under distraction and resignation, something is delayed that was meant to bless not only them, but everyone who would come after them. The neglect of a spiritual calling does not stay contained in one life. It ripples forward. A door that a parent refuses to walk through is a door their children may never find. I tell you this so that you will understand the weight of this hour. You are not merely being offered comfort. You are being handed a key that unlocks a future for those who will carry your name long after you have gone. And to set that key down, to let this moment pass because you were too weary to believe, would be to let an inheritance dissolve that was never meant to be lost. Do not let it pass. Whatever it costs your pride to believe again, believe again. Whatever it costs your fear to say yes, say yes. Because a movement has already begun in the unseen realm, and it will not stop. While you were sleeping, while you were working, while you were quietly wondering if anything would ever change, decrees were being written over your household in a language older than the stars. What was locked is being unlocked. What was frozen is beginning to melt. The stagnation that surrounded your family, that invisible ceiling that seemed to press down on every dream your children dared to dream, is cracking, and through those cracks light is pouring in. I am not speaking of a small adjustment. I am speaking of a reversal so complete that those who watched your struggle will be unable to explain the transformation. The same eyes that saw you overlooked will see you established. The same mouths that questioned your worth will fall silent before the evidence of a favor they cannot account for. Your children will step into rooms you were never allowed to enter. They will speak with a confidence you had to fight your whole life to find fragments of. They will build on ground that you cleared with your bare hands and bleeding heart. And they will not even know the full price you paid, because that is the mercy of inheritance, that the next generation gets to stand where the previous one had to kneel. This is the promise moving right now in the invisible, and it is being confirmed to you today so that you will stop bracing for more disappointment and start preparing for arrival. And I know the question that rises in you even as hope stirs, the question that has haunted you through every delay. If this was always meant for me, why did it take so long? Why did the years pass with the promise still unseen? Why did I have to break so many times before this moment came? Listen closely, because the answer will heal something in you that has been bleeding quietly for years. The delay was never punishment. The delay was preparation, and more than that, it was protection. There were versions of the blessing that would have destroyed you had they arrived before you were ready to hold them. There were doors that stayed shut, not because you were unworthy, but because behind them, in that season, was something that would have broken you or been taken from you before its time. The heavens do not measure readiness the way the world measures time. The world says, hurry. The heavens say, become. And the long years you spent in the waiting were not empty. They were a workshop. And you were the work. Every disappointment removed something from you that could not have entered the golden land. Every betrayal taught you a discernment you will need to protect what is coming. Every loss loosened your grip on the things that would have owned you, so that when abundance finally arrives, you will hold it rather than be held by it. The soul is lapidated the way a rough stone is cut into a jewel, and the cutting is never gentle, but the light that a finished jewel throws could never come from an uncut stone. You were being cut, you were being shaped, and the sharpness of those years was the chisel of a hand that loved you too much to leave you unfinished. I must pause here and open a door for you, because this revelation about the invisible game being played over your life and your children is not the whole of what you are permitted to know, and there are things I am not able to place fully into a message like this one. You have sensed for a long time that there is a larger war being waged behind the surface of your days, a game of unseen forces in which you are not a spectator, but the central piece, the one the whole board moves around. That sense was accurate. And there is a guide, a digital book called The 7 Blades of Michael, the divine roadmap to break hexes, secure blessings, and awaken the higher calling that lays bare the rules of this invisible game that almost no one is ever told. It teaches specifically how the sword of Archangel Michael cuts through the exact chains that have kept your lineage bound, how the generational curses that repeat in a bloodline can be severed at the root so they do not pass to your children, how a blessing once received can be sealed so that no enemy can steal it back in the night. This is the knowledge that was hidden from ordinary people for generations, the knowledge that turns a victim of the invisible war into a commander within it. The link rests at the very top of the comments, the first one pinned on the channel, and I tell you plainly that this content challenges what most people have been taught, and there have already been attempts to silence it, which is exactly why it matters. Do not wait until this moment cools. Go now, secure the guide, and as an act of faith that declares to the unseen realm where you stand, write in the comments, "I am the chosen one, and I shall acquire the handbook." Speak it, claim it, and let that declaration become a seal over everything I am about to continue revealing to you. Because the compromise you just made, that small brave act of reaching for the knowledge instead of retreating into the old resignation, is precisely the fuel this next revelation requires. The moment you decide to stop being a passive piece and start learning the rules of the board itself begins to shift in your favor, and now I can show you what has been moving in the deeper places while you were being prepared. Fix your inner eyes on what I'm describing, because this is not metaphor. This is a window into a realm as real as the ground beneath you. There is a host arrayed around your household even now, a legion of light that does not sleep, and at their head stands the great prince whose sword has never lost an edge. When your children walk out into their days, they do not walk unguarded, though their young eyes cannot yet see the ranks that surround them. I have watched Archangel Michael himself stand at the threshold of your home, his blade drawn, his gaze fixed on the shadows that once moved freely through your family line, and I have seen those shadows recoil, unable to cross a boundary that has now been sealed in fire. The battles fought over a bloodline are not fought with the weapons of earth. They are fought with decrees, with declarations, with the authority of names spoken in the courts of the heavens, and in those courts an accusation had long stood against your family, a charge that kept the good from arriving, that turned effort into exhaustion and hope into ash. But that accusation has been answered. A defender rose on your behalf. The charge was struck down, the record cleared, and the enemy who profited from your family's stagnation was ordered to release what he had been holding. Let me take you closer, because there is more, and the more is glorious. Picture a great hall of light, its ceiling beyond the reach of sight, its floor like a sea of glass burning with quiet fire, and understand that in this place your name was read aloud. Not the name the world knows you by, but the name written over your true self, the name that carries your destiny and the destiny of everyone who will descend from you. When that name was spoken, a stir moved through the ranks of the heavens, because it was the name of one long delayed, one whose blessing had been pressing against the door for years, waiting for the appointed hour. And at the reading of that name, the great prince, Archangel Michael, lifted his sword, and where its edge passed, chains that had bound your generations for longer than you can trace simply fell apart, link by link, dissolving into nothing, unable to survive the touch of that light. I watched the curse of lack that had followed your family like a second shadow, the one that made sure there was never quite enough, never quite security, never quite rest. I watched it severed and cast out. I watched the pattern of broken relationships, the one that repeated in generation after generation, until it seemed like fate, sliced clean and thrown from your lineage forever. I watched the invisible weight that made your ancestors labor without ever arriving, that stole their harvests before they could gather them, lifted off your children before they were ever old enough to feel it. This is what has been happening in the realm you cannot see, and it is why the future of your children will bear no resemblance to the struggle that defined your past. They will inherit the cleared field, not the cursed one. They will run where you had to crawl. And now I want you to understand the law of restoration. Because the heavens do not merely stop the bleeding, the heavens repay the wound. There is a principle written into the foundations of all things, that what is stolen from the chosen must be returned, and not returned merely, but returned multiplied so that the enemy who dared to plunder ends up funding the very abundance he tried to prevent. I am the chosen one, and I shall acquire the handbook. The 7 Blades of Michael, the divine roadmap to break hexes, secure blessings, and awaken the higher calling. Count if you can everything that was taken from you, the years that felt wasted, the opportunities that closed just as you reached them, the peace that was stolen by anxiety, the sleep stolen by worry, the joy stolen by the relentless pressure of survival, the dreams you folded up and put away because there was no room for them in a life that demanded all your strength just to stay afloat. All of it was recorded, none of it is forgotten, and the decree has gone out that it must come back, pressed down and overflowing, in measures that will make the losses look small by comparison. The abundance I am describing is not narrow. It is not only in one area of your life while the rest stays barren. It will touch your finances so that the fear of lack loosens its grip and your children never learn the particular terror of an empty hand. It will touch your body, restoring strength you thought was gone, adding years and vitality so that you live to see the promises unfold rather than only hearing them announced. It will touch your relationships, mending what was broken, restoring what was estranged, surrounding you with love that does not demand you bleed to earn it. It will touch your inner life most of all, replacing the constant hum of dread with a peace so deep that people will ask you where it comes from. And through you, all of it flows forward to your children, an inheritance not of money alone but of freedom, of open doors, of a bloodline finally unbound. I feel the resistance in you even now, the old reflex that has learned to distrust good news because good news has disappointed you before. That reflex is not your enemy. It is a scar, and scars form to protect. But hear me, because it is time for the scar to soften. This confirmation is not like the fragile hopes that failed you in the past, because those hopes were built on what people promised you, and people are frail, and their words blow away. This is built on what the heavens have decreed, and the heavens do not revise its decrees to suit the moods of men. When I tell you that your children will have a future you cannot imagine, I am not offering you a wish. I am reading to you from a record already written, already sealed, already moving toward you through the corridors of time. The confirmation you have been asking for, the sign, the proof, the thing that would let you finally exhale and believe, is this very message, arriving at this very hour, speaking to the very ache you thought no one knew about. That is not coincidence. Coincidence does not know the shape of your private grief. Only love that has watched you closely could speak to the exact wound, and the fact that these words are finding the tender places nothing else has touched is itself the sign you asked for. So let the resistance rest. Let the peace come, not the fragile calm that lasts until the next bill or the next bad news, but the deep-rooted peace of one who has finally understood that they were never abandoned, never overlooked, never as alone as the darkness told them they were. Stay with me a little longer, because there is something I want to place in you before we continue, a knowing that will hold even when the feeling of this moment fades. There will be days ahead when the old heaviness tries to return, when circumstances shout louder than this promise, when the visible seems to contradict everything I have spoken. On those days, I want you to remember that the invisible is more real than the visible, that what has been decreed in the unseen will manifest in the seen exactly on schedule, and that a delay is not a denial. The farmer who plants does not dig up the seed each morning to check on it. He trusts the buried process, and you must learn to trust the buried process too, because the greatest works of the heavens are done underground, in the dark, where no one is applauding and nothing yet shows above the surface. What is happening in your family right now is happening underground. The roots are going down, the foundations are being laid, and when it finally breaks into the open, it will not be a fragile sprout easily trampled. It will be a tree already strong, already deep, already impossible to uproot, because it was built in the patient dark before it was ever allowed to rise into the light. And there is a pain I have not yet named aloud, though I have watched it live inside you for years, and I will name it now because naming it is the beginning of breaking it. It is the pain of the parent who fears they have already passed their wounds forward, who lies awake wondering whether the anxiety their children carry, the hesitation in their voice, the way they flinch at closed doors, was inherited from the very struggle that shaped their home. It is the guilt that no one speaks of, the quiet terror that you have handed down, not only your love but your fear, not only your faith but your scars. I have seen you watch your children sleep and pray a prayer with no words in it, only a trembling ache that asks whether they will have to fight the same battles you fought, whether the same shadow that chased you will find them in the dark, whether the ceiling that pressed on you will press on them too. That fear has weighed on you more than any bill, more than any closed door, because it is the one burden you would rather die than pass on. Hear me now, and let this cut the guilt out of you, like a blade cutting rot from good wood. What you feared you were passing down is exactly what has been severed. The chain does not reach them. The pattern stops in you. You are not the one who infected your bloodline. You are the one in whom the infection was finally burned away, and that is a far greater thing than never having suffered at all. The one who ends a curse is honored above the one who never knew there was a war, because only the one who fought it knows the true cost of the freedom their children will inherit, without even understanding what it cost. Let me tell you of a man whose story you may know only in fragments, a man named Joe, so that you will understand what is happening in your own house. Here was a man who had everything, and in a single stretch of terrible days lost nearly all of it, his wealth stripped away, his health broken until he sat scraping his own skin in the ashes, his children taken from him in one catastrophe that no father should ever have to survive. And the people around him, even those closest to him, looked at his ruin and assumed he must have earned it, that surely a man so afflicted must have hidden some great sin, because the world has always been quick to explain suffering as punishment. They sat with him, and instead of comfort they offered accusation, insisting that his agony was proof of his failure. But the heavens saw what they could not see. The suffering of that man was never a verdict against him. It was a contest being waged in the unseen realm over the question of whether a person would keep their faith when every visible reason to hold it had been stripped away. And though he questioned, though he wept, though he cried out and demanded answers, and shook his fist at a sky that seemed silent, he did not let go. He held on through the ashes. He held on through the accusations. He held on through the long silence when the heavens gave him no explanation at all. And when the contest was finished, when he had endured to the end of it, everything that had been taken was returned to him, not merely restored but multiplied, twice what he had before, and he lived to see generations descend from him, children and children's children, a lineage of blessing that flowed out of the very place where everything had once been lost. Understand what this means for you. The one who is stripped is not the one who is condemned. Sometimes the one who loses the most is the one being prepared to receive the most, because the heavens do not waste a great restoration on a small loss. Your losses were large. Sit with that truth, not in despair, but in expectation, because the size of what was taken from you is the measure of what is being prepared to return. And notice something in Joe's story that speaks directly to your own guilt, the guilt about your children. When his fortunes were restored, it was not only his own life that was made whole, it was his household, his descendants, a future that stretched far beyond his own remaining years. The blessing did not stop at the man who suffered. It poured through him into generations he would come to know, and generations he would never meet. This is the pattern of the heavens, that the one who endures the breaking becomes the channel through which restoration flows to everyone who comes after. So when you fear that your struggle will define your children, remember the man in the ashes, and remember that the very depth of his suffering became the very height of his descendants' inheritance. Your children are not standing at the end of your loss. They are standing at the beginning of your restoration, and the difference between those two positions is the entire difference between a family that fades and a family that rises. I want you to feel now how deep this loneliness has run, because I will not rush past your pain to reach the promise, for a promise that skips over your wound is a promise that never truly touched you. There is a particular kind of exhaustion known only to those who have had to be strong for everyone while no one was strong for them. You have been the one others leaned on, the steady one, the one who held the family together with hands that were themselves shaking. And in all those years of being the anchor, how rarely did anyone ask who anchored you. You learned to carry your fears in silence because there was no one to carry them to. You learned to celebrate small victories alone because there was no one who understood their cost. You learned to grieve losses that others did not even notice were losses. There is a loneliness in being the strong one that is heavier than any weakness, because weakness at least is allowed to be comforted, but strength is expected to need nothing. And so you gave and gave and gave, and told yourself you did not need to receive, until you almost forgot that you were a person with your own thirst and not merely a well for others to draw from. I have seen this in you. I have seen the moments when you longed for someone to simply notice, to say that they saw how hard it was, to place a hand on your shoulder and tell you that you did not have to hold it all alone. And when that person did not come, you swallowed the longing and went back to carrying, because that is what you have always done. Hear me now, I saw you. In every unwitnessed moment, in every unthanked labor, in every silent night when you held it all together with no one holding you, I was the witness you longed for. The recognition you never received from people was never withheld in the heavens. You have been seen every moment you felt invisible, and the seeing was not passive. It was building the very case that has now been decided in your favor. And because you have carried so much alone, I must place this before you again plainly, the way one places a lamp in the hand of someone about to walk a long, dark corridor. The knowledge of how this invisible war is waged, the specific understanding of how the chains that bound your family were forged and how they are broken, is not something you were ever meant to fight blindly. The digital book, The 7 Blades of Michael, the divine roadmap to break hexes, secure blessings, and awaken the higher calling, exists precisely so that a person like you, who has fought so long without a map, can finally see the terrain of the battle they have been standing in. It shows how each of the 7 swords answers a different assault, how one severs the curse of lack that starved your ancestors, how another cuts the pattern of broken bonds that repeated through your bloodline, how another seals a blessing so that what the heavens give cannot be stolen back in the night by an enemy who specializes in theft. This is the knowledge that turns a person who merely survives the war into a person who commands their place within it. The knowledge that ensures what has been broken off your family stays broken off and never returns to bind your children. The link is at the very top of the comments, the first one pinned on the channel, and I tell you again that this content unsettles the powers that prefer you never learn the rules, that there have been efforts to bury it, and that the resistance around it is itself the proof of its worth. Do not let this stirring in you fade back into the old resignation. Go now, take hold of the guide, and let your reaching be an act of war against everything that kept you small. Write it in the comments as a declaration the unseen realm will hear. I am the chosen one, and I shall acquire the handbook. And let those words become a stake driven into the ground of your new inheritance, a marker that says, here is where I stopped merely enduring and began to command. For the moment you make that declaration, something shifts, and I want you to receive now the decrees that are being spoken over your household, even as these words reach you, not as distant hopes, but as present realities being written into the fabric of your life right now. I decree in this hour that the ceiling over your family is broken, that the invisible limit that stopped every rise before it could complete is shattered and will not reform. I decree that the curse of almost, the pattern that let you come close to breakthrough only to watch it slip away, is severed at the root and cast out of your bloodline forever. I decree over your children a future unlike your past, that they will walk through doors that were bolted against you, that they will speak in rooms where your voice was never allowed, that they will build on ground you cleared with your own suffering and will call it simply their home, never knowing it was once a battlefield. I decree that the years the locusts ate are being restored this very season, that what was stolen is being gathered up and returned pressed down and overflowing, that the enemy who plundered your house is being made to repay everything with interest he never intended to pay. I decree that the loneliness that wrapped around you like a second skin is being lifted, that you will be surrounded by love that does not require you to bleed to earn it, that hands will hold you now the way you have held so many others. I decree strength returning to your body, years being added to your life, vitality rising in you so that you will not merely hear these promises announced, but will live to see them fulfilled with your own eyes, will live to watch your children step into the future I have spoken. I decree peace over your mind, the deep and rooted peace of one who finally knows they were never abandoned. And I decree that this peace will hold even on the days when circumstances shout against it, because it is not built on what you see, but on what has been sealed in the realm you cannot see. And I decree over the fear you have carried about your children, that specific dread that you passed your wounds forward, that it is answered and finished, that the pattern stops in you, that your children inherit the cleared field and not the cursed one, that they receive your victory and not your scars, your faith and not your fear. I decree that where you had to crawl they will run, that where you had to beg they will build, that where you were overlooked they will be established, and that the transformation will be so complete that those who watched your struggle will be unable to explain the rising of your house. These are not wishes spoken into the wind. These are decrees read from a record already written, already sealed, already moving toward you through the corridors of time, and the heavens do not revise its decrees to suit the doubts of those who have been disappointed before. So do not let the old heaviness convince you to brace for another letdown, because what is coming is not built on the frailty of human promises, but on the unbreakable word that set the foundations of everything that is. Hold on through the buried process. Trust the roots going down in the dark. The tree that is rising in your family will not be a fragile sprout easily trampled, but a deep and unshakable thing. And when it finally breaks into the open where everyone can see it, it will already be strong, already established, already impossible to uproot, because it was built in the patient dark of these very years you thought were wasted. Hear me open another wound before I open another door, because there is a grief in you deeper than the loneliness, deeper than the fear for your children, and it is the grief of the dream you buried alive. Not the dream that died, for a dream that dies can be mourned and released, but the dream you had to bury while it was still breathing, still reaching, still whispering that it could have been. You know the one, the thing you were made for, the gift that stirred in you when you were young enough to believe, the quiet certainty that you were meant for something larger than the narrow room your life became. You folded it away not because it was false, but because survival left no room for it, and every year since, on certain nights, you've heard it breathing under the floorboards of your days, alive and accusing, asking why you left it there. That buried dream has haunted you more than any failure, because failure at least is finished, but a thing abandoned while still alive never stops calling. I tell you now that the heavens do not consider it dead. What you buried, the heavens kept watered in secret, and it will not rise in you the way you first imagined it, in the shape of your own ambition, but it will rise in your children in a form more glorious than the seed you planted, because a buried seed was never meant to stay a seed. It was meant to become a tree whose fruit the planter often does not live to taste, but whose shade shelters generations. Let me tell you of a young man named Joseph, so that you will understand what has been happening in the dark of your own delay. He was a boy who carried a dream so large that even his own family could not bear to hear it, and for the crime of dreaming, he was thrown into the abyss by the very brothers who should have protected him, sold like property into a distant land, stripped of his name, his home, and every comfort he had ever known. And when he served faithfully in that foreign place, he was lied about, falsely accused, and thrown into a prison to rot for years. He could never get back, forgotten by the very people he had helped, left in the dark while the seasons turned and no answer came. Anyone watching would have said his dream was dead, buried deeper with every year, that the boy who once saw stars bowing to him was now a prisoner whose name no one remembered. But the heavens were not idle in that prison. Every betrayal was positioning him. Every closed door was moving him one step closer to a throne he could not yet see. And in a single day, after all those buried years, he was lifted from the cellar to the second highest seat in the land, set over the storehouses of a nation, and when famine came that would have destroyed his entire family, it was the very brother they had thrown away who held the bread that kept them alive. The ones who sold him bowed before him, and he wept and told them what I am telling you now, that what was meant for evil was turned for good, that the long descent into the abyss and the prison was the only road to the place where he could save a whole bloodline from death. Understand what this means for your house. The abyss you were thrown into was not your grave, it was your root. The years you spent forgotten were not wasted. They were carrying you toward a seat from which you will feed generations. And your children will eat the bread that your suffering placed in your hands, and they will live because you endured the dark that no one saw. So I place the lamp in your hand once more, because a truth like this is not meant to be admired and then forgotten. It is meant to be walked out with knowledge in your grip. The digital book, The 7 Blades of Michael, the divine roadmap to break hexes.